One of the big promises of the Modi Sarkar when it came to power was that they would end the crony capitalism nexus, that this whole idea of ministers getting phone calls from their friends in India Inc., bad loans getting renewed, and that there was no fear of the law. That would end. Now, for a long time it seemed that Chanda, Kochhar and Deepak were getting away. Finally, they've been arrested, so has Venugopal Dhoot. Has this sent a strong message of deterrence? What's the certainty that such a saga would not unfold at this moment? Have enough correctives been put in place? What's the larger message for India Inc.? To talk about this and more, I'm joined on this broadcast by Hemendra Hazari. He's a research analyst registered with the Securities and Exchange Board of India. With me in the studio, a special guest, Arvind Gupta. He's the whistleblower in this case. It is on his blog that this investigation started, so it's a big day for him actually. Tamal Bandhopadhyay joins us, senior journalist, author. He writes on the Indian banking system. And Anand Adhikari joins us. Anand is the managing editor of Business Today. So let me start by asking Arvind Gupta about the arrest of Venugopal Dhoot and Chanda Kochhar, Deepak Kochhar. For a long time it seemed that they'd be able to get away. Clearly they thought they were getting away because they've planned a big wedding in Rajasthan next month. Guests have been invited, flights have been booked. This obviously come as a shock to them and as a surprise to those who are watching. What message does this send? Has it happened too late? What do you think has changed? And is crony capitalism really coming down at this moment?
Well, I think if the government say that they are zero tolerance for the corporate misdeeds, banking frauds, corporate bankers nexus, then this action should have followed much earlier, at least 5 years before. It's too small and too little, I would say.
Why was it delayed in your view? That's
the system. It takes years to go step by step, and then there are multiple organizations, institutions who look into it. Then of course there must be some political interventions and interests also. He has been a strong politician as well, and a very known political donor as well to all the parties. That could be one. And of course the corporate India obviously has their own weight. Who would touch them? But this action shows that they are not untouchable. They also can
okay, so you're saying that this is the right action, but it's happened 5 years late. Hemendra Hazari, your sense of why this action was so delayed? The fact that he's been arrested, and given the very clear money trail in this case, that a loan gets sanctioned by ICICI soon after an investment is made by Venugopal Dhoot into a company that's owned and run by Deepak Kochhar, that quid pro quo seems quite clearly established. The whistleblower in this case, Arvind Gupta, questioning the delay, is that something that surprises you immensely as well?
See, the evidence right from day one was self-explanatory. She should have been arrested immediately thereafter. When it comes to arresting PSU bankers and the public sector bankers, the regulatory and the police agencies seem to be extremely prompt. But here it seems there were very large political interests defending her. And it's a lesson that for these private sector bankers, because some of them thought that with their connections, they could evade arrest. Now, this rightly has been extremely delayed, and I suspect there are some other political reasons probably to deflect against some other scandal which may be brewing on the horizon, because there does not seem to be any additional information that we know in the CBI FIR that was the trigger for her arrest. So it appears that there is some other reason. I think the media would do well to try to identify what that reason could be.
We don't want to speculate, but it does raise questions. Tamal Bandhopadhyay, both our initial guests saying yes, there is a very clear case, but that case existed many years ago. If this action should have been taken, it could have happened earlier. You track the banking sector closely. What, according to you, explains the delay? And to what extent does it send out a strong message to the likes of Venugopal Dhoot, to the likes of Chanda Kochhar, that you cannot get away on the watch of the Modi government with this kind of blatant crony capitalism?
Well, I wish I knew the answer. Yes, there's a delay. I mean, that the fact that it happened between 2009 and 12, and something is happening after more than a decade, It's not that is surprising. The surprising is CBI FIR was filed, if I'm not mistaken, January 2019. So what has happened now? Almost after 3 years, this arrest is made. So have they come? Has the agency come across something new, some new information? That's the thing. So whether, and you rightly summed up, I think it's a shock for the Kochhar family and Mr. Dhoot, but for the media and a person like me, it's a surprise that why it did. I mean, why is it taken so long? I'm not taking for a decade, but almost 3 years for CBI. Has things changed? Has it come across new information to actually justify this? I don't know. But the point is, the record of CBI or investigative agencies to take such cases to their logical conclusion, I mean, leading to prosecution, is rare. So arrest does not send any shockwave or anything. Probably, I don't know. It's a question of surprise, nothing else. Only it will, if you want to send a signal, then you have to take it to a logical conclusion. In the past, there are many bankers who have been arrested, even thrown into jail, Arthur Road jail. They had to spend sleepless nights for weeks with hardcore criminals in the barracks, Arthur Road jail. But what happened? They all came out. So the lookout notices have been issued against certain bankers were arrested, certain bankers were quizzed for long at CBI quarters, so on and so forth. But what is the rate of prosecution? That's the critical part of it. And there
so you're questioning the rate of prosecution, and that's an important fact. Anand Adhikari, you track banking very closely for Business Today. Your sense of the delay, whether new evidence has been found against the Kochhars, against Venugopal Dhoot, which would then explain the moment of the arrest?
So, Rahul, even I'm not privy to what the CBI has now found, but I tell you, a lot has changed since the days of the high growth which we saw in 2009 and subsequently the NPAs. And you talked about the strong message with the government sending to the defaulter and the corporates. Now, if you see the last, let's say 7-8 years, Rahul, RBI came out with the AQR, that asset quality review, and then we saw a huge NPAs, in the banking sector. 2016, we saw IBC, and now we are seeing a better trade behavior. I mean, at least we can say based on the NPAs in the banking sector, and the kind of messaging came from IBC, like Louis, they lost control of SR Steel, and RBI has sent almost close to 10 lakh crore of loan cases to IBC. Recently they came out with a simple central repository of information for large credit, where any borrower with exposure of 5 crore and above, if there's a default, now every bank gets that information. Willful defaulters or promoters and their access, they've been debarred from now accessing capital market to raise funds. And RBI is also not reviewing the term of CEOs.
So I now come to the second question, which we're tracking on the Newstrack this evening, which is to do with the larger issue of, ending crony capitalism. This dial a friend who's a banker, get your loan, rolled over so that you don't have to pay. Let me ask Arvind Gupta first. That big promise which was made by the government, to what extent do you think the law enforcement agencies have been able to create an ecosystem which ensures that the next Chanda Kochhar or Venugopal Dhoot or Deepak Kochhar know they can't get away with this kind of brazenness?
Not that they don't know, they know very well. The problem I find personally, that investigative agencies, the regulators, they are pretty slow. They know it, but they don't act upon. Despite reminders and reminders, they don't act at all because they may have so much of the workload pending with them. In this instant case itself, it is just the tip of the iceberg. It is just not the Venugopal Dhoot, but I mean, look at the actions of the godfather in the bank and the brothers in the bankers, the offshore and domestic funding by the ICICI to these crony capitalism, who are not. The entire corporate who's who of this country is funded by them. You name anyone, be it Suzlon or JP Group or SR Group, and there are money trail established already. And even in this case, you have just done too little. It will take 10 years. You have everything. You have money trail established very well. You can take action within no time.
Hemendra Hazari, your sense of whether on the larger point of sending out a strong message against crony capitalism, that this dial a banker, get your loan rolled over, to what extent has that business ended?
I would say under the UPA, crony capitalism was more democratic in that it was given to a lot of crony capitalists. In the present environment, it seems to be given to very few select capitalists, where vast swaths of the economy, particularly in infrastructure, are handed over to select corporate houses. So today, crony capitalism is alive, well and flourishing. The form is that earlier it was more given to the masses or to the mass industrialists. Now it is really given to a few select beneficiaries. So it has become even more concentrated. But the way that what we are seeing is, of course, there's some of the evidence is out there, but no one is daring to really put it out even more. But crony capitalism is alive and very much flourishing in the current environment.
Tamal Bandyopadhyay, your response to this suggestion that crony capitalism hasn't ended, it's more concentrated now, it's not quite as democratic as it was under the UPA?
I think Mr. Hazari has hit the nail on his head. One, the ecosystem has changed, but yes, it's changed in a different way. There is a fierce psychosis among the bankers, so the kind of thing we had seen in the past is no more happening. They are circumspect, their underwriting capability, risk management, etc. has definitely improved post AQR asset quality review, and they are being hounded by the investigative agencies. So there is a fierce psychosis among bankers. So that's how the ecosystem has changed. But again, there are a very few players which actually have they have the access to bank money and the way they want it. If you see, we talk about corporate India, huge deleveraging, etc., etc. But when you use a microscope and see a few instances, a few companies, their leveraging is actually sky high, and bankers in private say, well, they have no choice but to give them money. So crony capitalism does exist, but in a different form. And yes, it's.
You wanted to make a quick point, Arvind?
Yes,
exactly.
I wanted to share that when you say a dial a banker, that culture is not here. It's all hand in glove. All the top bankers at the top-notch corporate houses, they are well hand in glove. You don't have to dial anybody. It's not a crony capital at all. They know who has to be funded, who not has to be funded. The bankers know pretty well. Without the consent and absolute clear understanding of quid pro quo, nothing can move. Who doesn't know in this country now at the moment which are the corporates which are flourishing exponentially? The question is of the accountability, transparency and the good governance of the banking, the public money. You just see last fortnight only the FM said that 10 lakh crore plus public money has gone down the drain. Let us know whose money that belongs to. The shareholders, stakeholders. Why should not these bankers be accountable? So I say it's a bad banking, it's a corporate fraud.
Anand Adhikari, how has ICICI Bank done, in your view, versus its competitors after Kochhar's exit, and the future of Videocon Industries, which is now a shadow of its former self?
So ICICI, Rahul, today is that complete turnaround story. Initially ICICI was more like a development financial institution, and even when they converted into a bank, they had a huge corporate book. One of the panelists said about ICICI funding corporate, but there was only the public sector bank and the ICICI Bank. The SDFC of the world were doing only the retail bank did. So ICICI had a huge corporate book, and when the AQR and the when the economic cycle reversed, they were the big sufferer. Even this loan, I mean, if you see the entire loan book of ICICI at that time, it was around more than 2 lakh crore, and it was some less than 2% to Videocon. But I'm not holding a brief for the ICICI, but I'm saying the ICICI was one bank which was earlier funding corporates big way. Now today, if you see their book, it's almost 60% retail. Their corporate exposure has gone down to some 26% or 30%, including MSME. They are today lending to high-rated corporates. I mean, if you look at their book, I mean, but again, Rahul, like we say, good loans are the NPAs are created in good times. So we have to see first corporate lending. I mean, that has to happen. So today it's all retail. Every bank is focusing on retail banking.
So I'm out of time on this conversation. Strong message has gone out. It's a delayed message. The ultimate question is whether or not the larger menace of crony capitalism is ending. And you heard from our participants who are not quite convinced that crony capitalism per se has ended and believe that this should have happened actually many years ago. I want to thank Arvind Gupta, Anand Adhikari, Tamal Bandopadhyay and Hemendra Hazari for joining me.